The last chair came through Eliza Harrow's doorway before she did. One of Orson Fenwick's men carried it by a single rung and dropped it in the snow, where it landed on its side beside her wash basin, 2 quilts, and a cracked blue cup. The wind rolled white powder over them at once, as if Wyoming territory meant to bury the life she had built before her eyes. Orson stood at the gate in a black fur coat, holding an eviction notice with her late husband's name scratched across the bottom. His smile was gentle enough for a church door and cold enough for the road beyond it. "There now, Mrs. Harrow," he said. "No need to make a bitter morning worse. A debt is a debt and law is law." Eliza tightened one hand around her satchel. With the other, she touched the silver locket beneath her collar. The little cottage had been hers through 3 winters as a widow. The day would soon come when this castaway met an injured rancher she saved from the snow, and together they rebuilt his homestead from the ashes, but today she was just a woman losing her valley. Fenwick's men had nailed the door shut, while half of Oakhaven watched from the road. "You have no right to this house, Fenwick." Her voice did not shake. That seemed to disappoint him. He lifted the paper. "Your husband borrowed against it. These receipts say I do." "Those receipts lie." "Paper seldom lies, ma'am. People do." The deputy beside Fenwick studied his boots. A woman Eliza had helped through fever pulled her boy close and turned away. The miller who had eaten at her table moved behind his wagon. No one offered a word. Fenwick had loans against half their shops and grazing claims near the rest. Their silence gave him more power than the notice in his hand. Eliza bent, righted the chair, then left it where it stood. She could not drag a household into a storm. She packed 1 quilt into the satchel with bread, matches, spare stockings, and the small sewing roll that had belonged to her mother. Then she faced the cottage once more. "When the truth is found," she said, "you will wish you had left my door alone." Fenwick's smile thinned. "Truth won't keep you warm tonight." "Neither will begging." She walked past him. Snow caught on her lashes and grief pressed behind her ribs, but she would not give Fenwick tears to carry home. The Oakhaven road climbed into a white valley between dark ridges. Her nearest cousin lived 3 days east if the passes remained open. Behind her, a hammer struck the last nail into her door. Ahead, the wind erased the wagon tracks almost as soon as she stepped into them. By noon, the settlement had vanished behind falling snow. Eliza's boots were wet through, and the bread in her satchel had frozen hard. She kept moving because the cold grew teeth whenever she stopped. Her cottage, her garden, and the grave on the rise seemed less like places she had known than pictures seen through ice. Then somewhere ahead, a horse screamed. Eliza raised her head. Another cry came from beyond a bend, followed by the hard clatter of wood. She left the road and pushed through snow to her knees. A freight wagon lay overturned in the ditch. 1 wheel spun uselessly in the wind. 2 draft horses strained against tangled traces, their eyes rolling white. "Easy, boys, stand still." She approached from the side, speaking low until the nearer horse stopped kicking. A man lay beneath the wagon bed, one shoulder visible, his dark coat half buried. Blood marked his temple. His right leg was pinned beneath a timber, bent at an angle no sound leg should take. Eliza dropped her satchel. "Sir, can you hear me?" His eyelids moved, but he did not answer. Snow already filled the hollow beside his neck. Night was coming, and the storm would kill him before anyone from town found the wreck. It would kill her too if she spent her strength foolishly. She studied the wagon instead of surrendering to fear. The wheels had slipped from the road, and the side rail rested against a rock. A broken pine limb lay uphill. Eliza dragged it down, wedged the thick end beneath the rail, and built a fulcrum with 2 flat stones. When she threw her weight against the branch, the wagon groaned but barely moved. The man opened his eyes. They were gray, clear for one breath and clouded the next. "Leave it," he rasped. "No. Team will bolt." "Then help me by staying awake." She cut the tangled traces first. The horses stumbled free but remained near, trembling. Eliza returned to the lever, braced one boot against the rock, and drove down with both hands. Pain tore through her shoulders. The wagon lifted an inch. "Now," she said, "pull." The stranger clawed at the snow with his uninjured heel. Eliza shifted the branch, gained another inch, then another. The rail slipped. She caught it on the stones, seized his coat, and dragged until his broken leg cleared. The wagon crashed back so hard the spinning wheel stopped. For a moment, both lay breathless in the snow. "Name," Eliza said. "Grant Calder." She knew it. Calder owned the lonely ranch beyond the western ridge, though she had never met him. "Where is your cabin?" He pointed weakly toward the pass. "Valley Road, 6 miles." 6 miles might as well have been 60, but the wagon tongue remained sound. Eliza righted the team, retied the traces, and salvaged a plank from the broken side. Grant bit down on his glove while she straightened his leg enough to bind it to the plank with strips torn from her petticoat. He made no complaint. When she finished, sweat shone on his face despite the cold. "You know Bones," he whispered. "My father kept sheep. They broke legs too." "I'm not a sheep." "Then stop trying to die like one." Something almost like a laugh left him. It ended in a groan. The brief sound told Eliza there was life enough in him to fight for. She pulled the fallen tarpaulin from beneath a crate and wrapped it around his shoulders. One of the horses had cut its flank, but the wound was shallow. She soothed the animal, freed a twisted buckle, and searched the scattered freight. Flour had burst into the snow. A coffee tin rolled in the ditch. Beneath the wagon seat she found a coil of rope, a hatchet, and a small tool chest. Every useful thing went into the wagon. She had learned during her husband's long illness that survival was often no grand act. It was noticing the dry match, the sound strap, and the last clean cloth while fear demanded all one's attention. Grant faded again as she worked. Each time his eyes closed, Eliza called his name and made him answer a question. How many horses? 2. Which road at the fork? West. Was there wood at the cabin? By the south wall. His replies shortened, but they remained sensible. The storm thickened until the pines across the road disappeared. For one hard moment, Eliza considered leaving him beneath the tarpaulin and seeking the cabin alone. It was the practical choice if the team could not pull the damaged wagon. Then Grant tried to lift himself, meaning to spare her the decision, and collapsed with a strangled breath. "Do not make choices for me," she said. His eyes opened. "Wasn't. You were preparing to be noble. It is usually another name for surrender." "Hard woman." "A live woman, you should try it." She saw the ghost of that laugh again. It gave her courage enough for the next task. Eliza built a ramp of snow and broken boards, then used the horses to pull the wagon upright enough to move. She hauled Grant onto the seat, wrapped her quilt around him, and climbed beside him. The team lurched as a gust struck. Grant's broken leg shifted, and darkness swept over his face. Eliza caught the reins before they fell. "Easy, boys, home now." The word home hurt when she said it, but the horses understood. They leaned into their collars and carried the injured rancher and the castaway widow into the whitening pass. Grant woke twice on the journey. The first time, he gave Eliza directions in single words: left at the split pine, down by the creek. The second time, he found her slapping snow from her sleeves while the wagon crawled through a drift. "You drove them." "I am driving them." "Thank you." "Save your breath." Darkness had settled when a cabin appeared below them, one square of black against the snow. Beyond it stood a barn, a corral, and the shadow of cattle huddled near a windbreak. Eliza guided the team into the yard, half carried and half dragged Grant to the porch, and found the door unlatched. Inside, the stone fireplace was cold. Eliza laid Grant on a narrow bed, lit a kerosene lamp, and searched the shelves. The cabin was spare but orderly. There were bandages, clean linen, a bottle of spirits, and enough split wood to start a fire. She heated water, cut away the frozen trouser leg, and examined the break. "It must be set," she said. Grant stared at the rafters. "Do it." She gave him a folded strap to bite, braced his foot, and pulled. The bone slid into place beneath her hands. Grant's back arched, but he made only one rough sound. Eliza packed the leg with straight splints and bound them firmly. Then she covered him and fed the fire until orange light reached every corner. Sometime near midnight, his fever eased. Eliza sat in a chair beside the bed with the axe across her knees, uncertain whether shelter freely entered could become another trap by morning. Grant woke and saw the weapon. "Fair caution," he said. "I did not know you. You know enough now, saved my life. That does not put mine in your hands." "No." He reached slowly into his vest, withdrew 2 keys, and separated the smaller one. "Back room, locks inside, yours." Eliza did not take it at once. "No claim on you," he added. "No price, stay till the road opens, longer if you choose. I will work for my keep." "Equal work, equal say." She searched his face for the smooth calculation Fenwick always hid beneath courtesy. Grant looked exhausted, embarrassed by his weakness, and entirely serious. Eliza accepted the key. "Your leg needs 6 weeks, perhaps 8. Then I need help. And I need shelter." "Settled." She carried her satchel into the back room. It held a small bed, a washstand, and a window that looked toward the valley. Grant had spoken truly. The lock turned from within. Eliza closed the door but stood with her hand on the key, listening to the fire crackle beyond it. Snow banked against the glass until the world outside disappeared. For the first time since Fenwick's men had carried out her chair, she was warm. Yet warmth given by a stranger felt fragile, and morning would reveal what kind of bargain she had made. If you believe shelter should never cost a woman her freedom, stay with Eliza and subscribe to stories where safety begins with choice. Morning revealed a ranch in trouble, and a man too proud to admit how much trouble it was in. Snow had broken the corral gate. Cattle crowded the rails. The woodpile would last perhaps 10 days, and Grant could not cross the cabin without crutches. Eliza made oatmeal, set a cup beside him, and pulled on her coat. "Where?" he asked. "The gate." "Too heavy." "Then I will use a lever." She took the double-bit axe from its peg, chopped a dead pine into manageable lengths, and split enough wood to refill the box. After that she attacked the gate. Grant sat on the porch with his splinted leg propped on a stool, carving replacement pegs and offering directions only when she asked. "Brace the lower hinge first," he said. "I saw it. You handle an axe better than most men in the valley." Eliza drove a peg home. "I work for my keep, Grant." "You earned a winter's keep on the road." "That was one day's work. Today is another." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair." It was the absence of argument that unsettled her most. Her late husband had been a kind man, but illness had filled their last year with worry and apologies. Since his death, every man who offered help had seemed to attach a hidden account. Grant simply sharpened the pegs and trusted her hands. By afternoon, the gate swung straight. Eliza led the cattle through it, spread hay, checked the water trough, and patched a loose section of fence. When she glanced toward the porch, Grant was watching her with a quiet admiration he made no effort to turn into ownership. "What?" she asked. "Nothing." "You are staring." "Thinking." "About?" His gaze moved to the repaired gate. "How this place managed without you." Warmth touched her cheeks that had nothing to do with labor. Eliza looked away and carried the tools inside. She set her father's silver locket on the shelf above the hearth while she swept. Near the table, one floorboard gave a hollow knock beneath the broom. Eliza knelt, worked the tip of a knife into the seam and lifted it. A narrow metal box lay in the dust below. "Grant," she called, "there is something here." He came slowly on crutches. The box was rusted at the corners, but the clasp opened. Inside rested a leather ledger, brittle receipts, and folded tax notices bearing territorial stamps. Grant sank into a chair as Eliza turned the first pages. "My father's book," he said, "thought it burned with the old house." Columns of figures ran back 20 years. Each annual tax had a red stamp beside it. Near the end, one page recorded the final payment on the valley acreage. Eliza lifted the locket from the shelf. Inside, behind a faded likeness of her father, she kept the last tax receipt from the small parcel he had once owned outside Oakhaven. The seal on Grant's book matched it, a spread-winged eagle over the letter W. "Your land is paid," she said. Grant leaned back. Weariness deepened the lines around his mouth. "Fenwick claims I owe him. He has papers, medical account after Ruth died, feed loan after the dry summer." "Do the sums match?" "Never did." Eliza examined the notices. "These tax stamps prove otherwise, Grant, at least about the land. He is lying." "He lied about yours too." She told him then about the cottage, the supposed note signed by her husband, and the debt that had grown each time she asked to see the original. Grant listened without interrupting. His hands closed around the arms of the chair. "Same hand at work," he said. "Yes, Fenwick chooses people alone enough that no one will object." "He chose wrong." Eliza looked at him. "Because you have me." "Because we have each other." The words settled between them, simple and dangerous. Before she could answer, a horse whinnied outside. Boots crunched in the yard. Eliza closed the ledger and slid it back beneath the floorboard. Through the window she saw Orson Fenwick dismount with 2 hired men. Snow shone on his black coat. A rolled paper protruded from his gloved hand. Grant reached for the rifle above the door. "No," Eliza said. "You cannot stand steady and he wants a quarrel. Back room, he knows you." She drew her scarf over her hair and moved into the porch's deep shadow instead. Hiding stung her pride, but if Fenwick learned she was there, he would know Grant had a witness to his fraud. Patience could be an action too. Fenwick stopped below the porch. "Calder, my friend, sorry to see the wagon treated you badly." "Get off my land, Fenwick." Now, that temper won't mend a bone." He unrolled a deed on the hitching rail. "Your medical account has come due, along with 3 seasons of interest. Sign the ranch over, and I may leave you the cabin until spring." Grant's knuckles whitened on his crutch. "No." "You're a broken man, Calder. Be sensible." Eliza watched Fenwick's paper lift in the wind. The signature at the bottom imitated Grant's firm strokes but pressed too heavily at each turn. The listed sum changed between the first page and the last. She memorized both figures. "I said no," Grant told him. Fenwick's false kindness vanished for half a breath. He glanced toward the cattle. "Then I'll take the herd against the balance. Monday morning." "Try it." One hired man rested a hand near his holster, but Fenwick smiled again. "Lawful men don't need to try. They collect." His gaze passed over Eliza. She lowered her face and held still. Then he mounted. At the gate, Fenwick pointed his whip toward the cattle. "Monday morning, Calder. They belong to me." The riders disappeared up the road. Grant started down the steps, fury making him careless. His crutch slipped. Eliza caught his arm before he fell. "You should have stayed inside," he said. "And learned nothing. His sums do not agree. His signature is copied." "Could have seen you." "He did not. Now we move the herd." Grant stared toward the white ridge. "Neighbors won't help. Fenwick owns their notes." "Then I will do it. Where can the cattle be hidden?" "High draw beyond the north ridge. Trail's bad." "Show me on the map." Before dawn the next morning, Eliza saddled Grant's bay gelding and tied bread inside her coat. The cold was sharp enough to make the leather reins stiff. Grant stood in the doorway on his crutches, anger and fear fighting in his face. "Turn back if the wind changes," he said. "I will judge it. Take the brass bell cow first, rest will follow." "I know." He caught the bridle before she mounted. "Eliza." She waited. "Come back." His voice was so low the wind nearly stole it. Eliza laid a gloved hand over his. "I intend to." She opened the corral and rode behind the herd. 40 cattle moved reluctantly through snow, steam rising from their backs. Eliza circled, called, snapped a length of rope against her saddle, and kept the lead cow climbing. The brass bell sounded through the trees like a lonely church. At the first farm she passed, a neighbor watched from his barn. Eliza asked for an hour of help. He glanced toward Oakhaven and shook his head. "Fenwick will close my account. Sorry, ma'am." "Then stay sorry." She rode on alone. The north trail narrowed above a ravine. One steer slid to its knees and the herd bunched behind it. Eliza dismounted, dug snow from beneath its chest, and pulled until it regained its footing. Hours passed in the rhythm of bell, hoof, and breath. Her fingers went numb. Twice she lost sight of the lead cow in blowing snow. Each time the bell called her forward. Near sunset, the trees opened onto a sheltered draw where grass rose through shallow drifts. A spring steamed beneath a rock shelf. Eliza counted the herd twice, repaired a brush barrier across the lower trail, and removed the brass bell so no sound would lead Fenwick's men to them. When she returned to the ridge, snow had begun to fall thickly. It covered the herd's tracks behind her. Grant waited on the porch, one lamp at his feet. "They are safe in the high draw," she said as she dismounted. "Fenwick's men will not find them in this snow." Grant looked past her at the vanishing trail, then at the ice on her coat. "You did it alone." "There was no one else." "There was you." He held out his hand. Eliza took it, and for the first time since reaching the ranch, she let him help her across the threshold. Grant had kept stew warm through the long afternoon. Eliza ate 2 bowls before the shaking in her arms eased. Only then did she tell him how the neighbor had refused, how the steer had fallen near the ravine, and how the spring in the hidden draw still ran beneath the snow. Grant listened as if each detail were a board laid across dangerous water. "Could mark a safer trail in spring," he said. "We could widen the turn above the ravine." He noticed the word before she did. "We." His gaze lifted, but he spared her the embarrassment of naming it. "Bell?" he asked instead. Eliza set the brass cattle bell on the table. "I removed it. Sound carries too far." "Good thinking." "Necessary thinking." "Still good." She smiled despite herself. The victory was small and temporary. Fenwick still held her cottage, still threatened the ranch, and still possessed men willing to enforce his wishes. Yet the cattle were beyond his immediate reach because Eliza had moved them. That fact mattered. All day the valley had answered her decisions. The herd had climbed, the brush barrier had held, and the snow had hidden the trail. She was no guest awaiting rescue. She had changed what would happen next. Grant raised his cup toward her in a quiet salute. Eliza touched hers to it. No promise passed between them, but the little sound carried respect, relief, and the beginning of hope. That night they sat beside the fire while wind pressed softly along the logs. Grant's late wife's hand-woven shawl lay across the empty rocking chair. Eliza had noticed it before but never asked. Now Grant touched its fringe. "Ruth made that," he said. "Fever took her 4 years ago. I drove for the doctor and overturned in spring mud. Got back too late. Been thinking every bad turn since was payment." Eliza wrapped both hands around her tea. "Grief is not a debt." "Feels like one." "That does not make it true." He glanced at her locket on the shelf. Your husband. My father gave me the locket. There is a receipt inside because he said a promise fades but a record remains. She opened it and showed him the folded paper. My husband was gentle. He was sick a long while. After he died, I kept the cottage. I thought work would be enough to keep dignity with it. Then Fenwick took the home too. Not your dignity. I thought it was gone. Grant's gaze held hers across the fire. You brought it back into this cabin, Eliza. Brought mine too. She looked toward the bedroom key beside her cup. You gave me a locked door when I had none. A key door is yours. That difference matters. I know. Silence followed, but it was not empty. It held the long road behind them, the work of the last days, and the possibility of something neither wished to name too quickly. Grant reached across the small space between their chairs and opened his hand. Eliza placed hers in it. His palm was rough and warm. He did not pull her closer. He simply held on, leaving the choice with her. Outside, snow softened the burned edges of the world. Inside, Eliza felt the first quiet certainty that she had become necessary to a place that was becoming necessary to her. If you know how much courage it takes to trust a home after one has been stolen, subscribe and keep that courage close. At dawn, the certainty met a new threat. The horses crowded the dry trough, pawing at frozen earth. Eliza worked the pump twice. No water came. She followed the pipe uphill and found the diversion gate chained shut at the boundary fence. A new sign declared the stream part of Fenwick's claim. Grant read it from the wagon seat, his splinted legs stretched before him. He blocked the spring. Can we break the chain? He'd call it theft, bring the deputy. The horses thrust their noses against the empty trough. Cattle could survive a day in the sheltered draw, but the team could not work without water. The nearest open creek lay 4 miles east, beyond a frozen flat. Clouds massed over the ridge. We won't let them thirst, Grant. I will get them to the creek. Storm coming. Then I leave now. He looked down at his useless leg. Guilt hardened his face. Should be me. It is not. That is the fact we have. Eliza hitched the horses in a line and tied a steel ice pick to the saddle. The wind rose before she reached the flat. It drove needles of snow beneath her scarf and pushed the animals sideways. She walked at the lead because riding made them fight the gusts. Every quarter mile, she stopped and rubbed life back into her fingers. At the creek, ice covered the water from bank to bank. Eliza tested 3 places, listening for a hollow note, then swung the pick. The steel glanced away. She struck again. On the 12th blow, black water welled through a crack. The horses smelled it and surged. Stand. She widened the opening carefully so none would break through. One by one, she led them forward, let them drink, and pulled them back. The final mare had just lifted her head when the first wall of the blizzard crossed the flat. The journey home became a white tunnel. Eliza could not see the ridge, but the wind had pressed one side of every fence post clean. She kept those dark lines on her right and walked. When the lead horse stumbled, she hauled it up by the cheek strap. When her own knees failed, she leaned against its shoulder until strength returned. The cabin appeared suddenly, no more than 20 yards away. Grant had hung 2 lamps on the porch and crawled to the gate to hold it open. Inside, he ordered. Horses first. Together, one limping and one nearly frozen, they led the team into shelter. Grant wrapped Eliza's hands in warm cloth and held them near the stove until the pain returned in fierce waves. Thank you, he said. They needed water. So did this ranch. You keep giving it life. Eliza looked up, but before she could answer, red light flickered across the window. It was not dawn. The eastern sky was burning. The barn, she said. She ran outside. Flames climbed the hay barn roof, flattened by the wind toward the cabin. One door stood barred from the outside and horses screamed within. Eliza seized the crosspiece with bare hands, threw it aside, and entered through rolling smoke. "Eliza!" Grant shouted from the porch. She found the mare's halter and cut the other lead ropes. "Out, go!" The horses plunged into the yard. A burning beam fell behind them. Eliza emerged with her coat smoking at one shoulder and rolled in the snow. Grant had dragged himself down the steps. He pushed a bucket toward her. "Roof's carrying sparks," he said. "Save the cabin." They had no water to spare. Eliza filled buckets with snow and threw them against the cabin wall. Grant crawled along the porch, beating sparks from the boards with a wet blanket. The barn roof collapsed in a thunder of embers. Fire raced through the winter hay, too hot to approach. "Not again," Eliza cried. "I won't let him burn us out." She climbed a ladder and shoveled snow across the cabin roof. Her muscles shook from the creek journey, but terror gave them more. Every spark that landed became Fenwick's nail in her cottage door. Every bucket she threw was a refusal. For an hour they fought. At last the storm strengthened, driving wet snow into the flames. The barn sank into a red skeleton. The cabin remained standing. Eliza walked toward the wreckage as if in a dream. Their hay was gone. One wall of the corral had burned. The horses shivered beneath the cottonwoods. Smoke and snow darkened the valley together. She found her locket still on the cabin shelf and closed her fist around it. Then all the strength she had carried from Oakhaven gave way. Eliza knelt beside a blackened beam and wept. "I found a place," she said, "and he burned it. I cannot lose another home, Grant. I cannot walk away again." Grant reached her on his knees because his crutches would not hold in the ash. He put one arm around her shoulders, carefully, waiting until she leaned into him. "We saved the cabin," he said. "We're still standing, Eliza. The cattle have no feed. We'll cut brush, buy hay, find a way." "With what money?" His jaw tightened. "Don't know yet." The honesty steadied her more than a false promise could have. Eliza wiped her face and looked across the ruins. Something metal reflected beneath a fallen rail. She pulled free a kerosene lantern, black with soot. The glass had shattered, but the brass base remained. 3 initials were stamped into it. OFC. Orson Fenwick Company. Eliza held it up. Grief cooled into purpose. He left his name in the ashes. By daylight, she cleaned the lantern with sand and oil. Grant watched from the table while she set it beside the tax ledger and the forged figures she had copied from memory. "The lantern proves his property was there," she said. "The ledger proves your land was paid, but neither gives us the original deed. Registry office has it. Then we go to town. Fenwick watches the road. We travel Sunday night. The office opens Monday before he comes for the cattle." Grant shook his head. "Registrar won't hand over old books. Edwin Foster is Fenwick's cousin." That was the turn Eliza had not expected. "Then he has helped him." Maybe he's only afraid. Same result so far." Eliza opened her locket and flattened her father's receipt. At the bottom stood the name of the registrar who had recorded the payment years earlier, Edwin Foster. "He signed this," she said. "If he refuses his own record in front of witnesses, he joins the fraud." Grant looked from the receipt to her face. "You have a plan." "We go to town, Grant. The registry ledger has the truth. I will find it." He did not tell her the road was too dangerous or the office too powerful. He rested one hand over the old tax book. "I'll back you, Eliza, every step. I do not need you to fight for me. No. I need you beside me." His expression softened. "That I can do." They spent Sunday repairing the wagon, hiding the ledger beneath the seat, and cutting willow brush for the cattle in the high draw. Grant's leg had begun to knit, but he still could not mount. Eliza patted the wagon box so he could ride without breaking the bone anew. After sunset, they loaded the soot-stained lantern, the tax records, and Eliza's locket. The storm had passed, leaving the sky hard and bright with stars. As the cabin disappeared behind them, fear tightened Eliza's chest. The last time she had taken that road, she had possessed nothing but a satchel. Now a homestead waited behind her, wounded but alive, and she was riding toward the man who meant to take it. The wagon reached Oakhaven before dawn. Eliza drove into an alley behind Wesley Morrow's smithy because Fenwick's hired men watched the main stable. Hammer blows already rang inside. Wesley was a broad man with a beard like iron filings and a voice that could cross the valley without effort. The journey had nearly failed at the covered bridge. A fresh chain stretched across its entrance, and a board warned that storm damage had made the crossing unsafe. Eliza climbed down with a lamp and examined the planks. Snow lay smooth across them. No wheel had tested the bridge since the storm, and no timber had fallen. Grant found bright scratches on the chain links. It had been placed there within hours. "Fenwick," he said. "He expects us." The river below was too swift to ford, and turning back would surrender the registry before it opened. Eliza searched the bank, found a maintenance path leading beneath the bridge, and discovered the chain fastened around a pin rather than locked. Fenwick's men had wanted the barrier to appear official while keeping it easy to remove for themselves. Eliza drove the pin upward with the wagon hammer. It resisted until Grant braced the chain with one crutch and took its weight. Together they freed it. The chain dropped into the snow. "Equal work," Grant said. "Equal say," Eliza answered. They crossed at a walk. Halfway over, riders appeared on the ridge behind them. Eliza snapped the reins, and the team pulled the wagon into town before the men could close the distance. Instead of taking the main street, she turned through the freight yard, circled the mill, and reached Wesley's alley unseen. Fenwick had placed another obstacle in their path, but he had also revealed his fear. A man certain of his papers did not chain bridges in darkness. "Calder," he boomed when he saw Grant splint, "you look like a fence post dropped on you." "Wagon," Grant said. Wesley turned to Eliza. Recognition and shame crossed his face. He had stood among the bystanders on the morning of her eviction. "Mrs. Harrow," he said, "I should have spoken." "Speak today. We need a witness at the registry." He glanced toward Fenwick's office. Supporting them could cost the smithy its loan and half its customers. Then his hammer came down on the anvil with one decisive crash. "You have one." At 8, Edwin Foster unlocked the registry office. He stopped when he saw Eliza, Grant on crutches, and Wesley filling the doorway behind them. "Records are closed for inventory," Foster said. "The sign says open," Eliza replied. "Old land books are delicate. I can't just open them for every claim." "This is not every claim. Orson Fenwick evicted me and means to seize Grant's ranch this morning." Foster's mouth tightened. "My cousin follows lawful procedure." "Then the records will protect him." "These records are old, ma'am. I can't just open them." Wesley stepped forward, boots shaking dust from the floor. "Open the books, Foster. Let the woman see." "This is none of your affair, Morrow." "Fraud in my town is my affair. So is cowardice. I have supplied Fenwick's crews for 6 years. If this claim is honest, I'll say so before every man in Oakhaven. If it isn't, I'll say that louder." Foster looked toward Grant. "You brought a mob." "Brought witnesses," Grant said. Eliza took out the locket. Her fingers were steady as she unfolded the receipt and laid it on the counter. "You signed this 12 years ago. The territorial seal is still clear. My father's parcel and Grant Calder's acreage were registered in the same season. I am asking you to compare your own hand with the claims Fenwick carries. Refuse, and 5 people will know you refused." The front bell rang behind them. A merchant entered for a bill of sale, followed by the deputy who had stood silent at Eliza's cottage. Neither left. Foster's face lost color. He took the receipt, examined his signature, and went to the iron cabinet at the rear. The volume is not to leave this room. It will not, Eliza said. He unlocked the cabinet and lifted out a leather-bound registry ledger so large he had to carry it with both arms. Dust rose when it struck the counter. Foster turned pages while Eliza read dates. The first entries concerned mining leases, then town lots, then valley homesteads. There, she said. Grant Calder's father's name stood halfway down the page. Beside it, under the spread-winged territorial seal, a final payment had been recorded 10 years earlier. The line below transferred the unencumbered property to Grant. Foster whispered, "That cannot be." "Read the seal," Eliza said. He did. His own predecessor's signature crossed it, witnessed by 2 clerks. Eliza turned the dust-covered page and found her husband's name on the next sheet. His supposed debt to Fenwick did not exist. Instead, the ledger showed a clear title passed to Eliza upon his death. For one suspended moment, the room was silent. Then the front door opened, and Orson Fenwick walked in with 2 hired men and a deputy from the county seat. "Well," Fenwick said, brushing snow from his sleeve. "A family gathering, Edwin. How touching." His smooth voice could not hide the sharp look he sent toward the open ledger. He laid a packet of papers on the counter and turned to Grant. "Monday morning, Calder, as promised. Sign now and we can spare your friend's embarrassment." Grant shifted his weight on the crutches. "Ask Eliza." Fenwick looked at her fully. Surprise hardened into amusement. "Mrs. Harrow, I wondered where the storm carried you. Have you taken up nursing broken ranchers?" "I have taken up reading." "A dangerous occupation when a lady mistakes ink for understanding." He nodded to the county deputy. "The seizure is authorized." Eliza moved between Fenwick and the ledger. The fear that had followed her from the cottage was still there, but it no longer controlled her voice. "Show your receipts." Fenwick smiled. "You have seen yours." "Show Grant's. Let the registrar compare them." "I do not answer to a homeless widow." "You made me homeless with a forgery. That is why you will answer." The merchant edged closer. Wesley folded his arms. The local deputy removed his hat. 5 witnesses now faced Fenwick, and his hired men looked suddenly less certain. Fenwick pushed his papers forward. There, lawful notes properly signed. Eliza laid Grant's tax ledger beside them, then pointed to the official book. "The registry ledger shows the debt was paid 10 years ago, and these receipts are forgeries." Her words filled the office. Foster bent over the documents. On Fenwick's receipts, the eagle seal had 7 feathers on its left wing. The official seal had 8. Grant's supposed signature leaned at the wrong angle. The ink on a note dated 6 years earlier was the same fresh blue-black used in Fenwick's current contract. "This signature was copied," Foster said. Fenwick's composure cracked. This is a mistake, a clerk's error." "3 errors?" Eliza asked. "On my house, Grant's ranch, and the water claim you posted yesterday." She set the charred lantern on the counter. "And this was found in our burned barn. Your initials are stamped into the base." One hired man took a step away from Fenwick. "He told us the place was empty." "Quiet," Fenwick snapped. The county deputy picked up the forged note. "Mr. Fenwick, you said these were copied from territorial records." "They were. Foster can explain. He's registrar." Foster recoiled. "I never issued these." Fenwick seized the edge of the official ledger. Eliza caught his wrist before he could tear the page. "No," she said, "you do not take another record." Grant moved beside her, unable to fight but solid as the counter. Wesley blocked the door with his broad shoulders. For a moment, Fenwick stared from one face to the next, searching for the fear that had always opened a path for him. He found none. The local deputy reached for Fenwick's arm. Fenwick shoved the papers into his face, knocked over an ink bottle, and darted through the side door. Wesley lunged but missed his coat by inches. Outside, a horse squealed. By the time they reached the street, Fenwick was riding east, bent low over the saddle. His hired men did not follow. "County line won't hide him," the deputy said. "Not with these papers." Foster pressed blotting sand across the spilled ink before it reached the ledger. Then he took Grant's deed and Eliza's title from the cabinet, compared each seal, and stamped certified copies in front of the witnesses. The iron stamp came down once for Grant and once for Eliza. 2 clean blows, 2 stolen homes restored. The county deputy voided Fenwick's seizure order. Wesley announced in a voice that carried into the street that any man who had paid Fenwick a land debt should bring his papers to the registry. People gathered outside. Some cheered. Others looked ashamed. The woman who had turned away from Eliza at the cottage came forward, but Eliza did not need apologies yet. Justice was not the sound of regret. It was the certified title in her hand, and the ranch waiting beyond the ridge. Grant stood beside her on the registry steps. "Your cottage is yours." "Yes." "You'll go back." The question cost him more than his sparse voice revealed. Eliza looked toward the western road. Her cottage held memories, but Calder Valley held work she had chosen, cattle she had saved, a burned barn she meant to raise again, and a man who had given her a key instead of a claim. "First," she said, "we rebuild the ranch." Grant's breath eased. "First." Spring came slowly to the valley. Fenwick was caught 2 territories east after trying to sell another false claim. The forged debts collapsed. Families returned to parcels they had nearly surrendered, and Edwin Foster opened every disputed volume under the eyes of witnesses. Wesley lost Fenwick's business but gained the work of half the valley, for honest men remembered who had stood in the registry doorway. At Calder Ranch, the cost of winter did not vanish with the snow. Charred beams remained stacked near the barnyard. 3 cattle had weakened beyond saving. Grant's leg healed with a slight stiffness that worsened before rain. Eliza sometimes woke hearing a hammer nail shut the cottage door, and the smell of kerosene could stop her breath. But the land belonged to those who rebuilt it. The first weeks after the hearing tested that belief. Stored grain had burned with the barn, and the thaw turned the yard into black mud. Eliza calculated every remaining sack of feed, sold 2 unneeded harness sets, and arranged with Wesley to exchange fence repairs for ironwork. Grant objected only when she proposed renting her cottage. "You fought to get it back," he said. "So I could choose what happens to it. Keeping it empty from sentiment would be another kind of loss." He considered that, then nodded. "Your choice." It was always those 2 words that reached her. Your choice. He said them when she rode to town alone, when she decided where the new barn should stand, and when she kept her own account at the Oakhaven Bank. His respect did not arrive in speeches. It appeared in the space he left for her answer, and in the way he altered plans when her judgment proved stronger. Eliza answered in the same language. She did not treat his injured leg as weakness once it healed. She asked for his knowledge of the valley, trusted his weather sense, and let him carry his share when he was able. They were not balancing a debt from the snowy road. They were building a life whose weight moved between them as circumstances changed. They began with the barn. Neighbors who had once been afraid came with wagons, timber, and hay. Eliza accepted the help without pretending their earlier silence had not mattered. Trust, like a wall, had to be raised straight and tested under weight. Wesley forged new hinges. Grant measured beams from the ground while Eliza climbed the frame. By summer, a red roof stood where the ashes had been. Eliza reopened her cottage long enough to collect her chair, her blue cup, and the box of her husband's letters. She kept the title in her own name. She rented the cottage to the woman who had once turned away, asking a fair sum and a promise that no widow in Oakhaven would face a winter road alone again. Then she returned to Calder Valley by choice. The cabin needed one last repair. Heat from the barn fire had cracked the old fireplace base, and the center hearthstone rocked whenever weight touched it. On the first cold evening of autumn, Eliza and Grant lifted a new gray stone between them. "Higher," she said. Grant adjusted his grip. "Your side." "My side is level." "So is mine." They looked at each other over the stone and laughed. It was a quiet sound, unfamiliar in the cabin and right within it. Together, they lowered the slab into mortar. It settled without a wobble. Eliza brushed dust from her hands. Grant remained kneeling beside the hearth, his heeled leg stretched slightly forward. Firelight warmed the scar at his temple. "The land is ours, Eliza," he said. "Yours by choice as much as mine by deed." She waited, sensing that his few words were carrying something larger. "If you'll stay," he continued, "I want a real courtship. No debt between us. No bargain. If you say no, the key is still yours and the work is still equal." Eliza looked around the cabin. Ruth's shawl remained on the rocking chair, honored rather than hidden. Her father's locket rested on the shelf beside the tax ledger. Her own certified title lay in a small iron box for which only she held the key. Nothing in the room asked her to disappear so another life could continue. "I am staying, Grant. We rebuilt this hearth together. We will build whatever comes next the same way." "Is that yes?" "Yes, a courtship on equal terms." He stood and offered his hand. Eliza took it. Grant kissed her forehead with such restraint that the tenderness of it reached deeper than urgency could have. Then he set 2 wooden plates on the table while she poured tea. Their first meal beside the repaired hearth was only bread, beans, and the last jar of summer peaches, but no feast could have carried more meaning. Afterward, Eliza hung her silver locket on a small hook above the mantel, beside Grant's old tax ledger. One held the receipt that had opened the truth. The other held the record that had saved the valley. Below them, the new hearthstone caught the fire's glow. Outside, the rebuilt barn stood dark and strong beneath the stars. Cattle moved safely near the water. The wind crossed the ridge, struck the cabin, and passed around it. Eliza sat beside Grant with her hand in his, not rescued, not owned, and no longer cast away. She had saved a wounded man, and he had given her shelter without taking her freedom. Together they had faced hunger, fire, fraud, and the old fear of losing home. Together they had made a place neither could have built alone. The fire cracked softly. Its light rested on their faces as they looked through the window at the secure valley, and for the first time in many winters, home was not something either of them feared losing. It was something they had chosen, defended, and rebuilt with their own hands. If Eliza's road from castaway widow to equal partner stayed with you, subscribe to remember that love should protect freedom instead of taking it.